Collaborative Check-ins, and I'm Dr. Lori Baudino, and I'm here today with Caroline Mazza, who's a pediatric physical therapist on the East Coast. And Caroline, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So we had this incredible conversation all about children and looking at the whole system, the whole body, and I really wanted parents and educators and providers to hear more about the work that you do.
Okay.
Maybe just starting out, like where do you practice? Where do you see children, and what types of children are you spending time with?
I've been a pediatric therapist for the past 20 plus years now, and I've done a broad range from like birth to 3 up to, school systems all the way through, young adults. But primarily right now, for the past 8 years, work in the Weston school system, which is in Connecticut. And I also see some students and children privately also. Over the children that I primarily see, I'd say that's been on the rise in the past 10 years is children with autism. Really working with the teachers and the staff in the school systems and how to integrate some of those students into the classroom so they could just be part of the community. I also work with children that have cerebral palsy and very compromised bodies that are in wheelchairs. I work with children that some are verbal, some are nonverbal, all modes of communication. I have my undergrad degree in communication disorders, so I have a background with that and just working on assistive technology with kids, low tech, high tech, all different types of devices. And now I can say that because of COVID and we've had the distance learning, that I've had to be really creative these past 5 or 6 months with, physical therapy is so hands-on, and it's been really difficult to navigate this new way of teaching and doing it through, through Google Meets or virtual sessions. It's been a lot of parent education. A lot of students that I work with have had trouble and a lot of difficulty attending the sessions that have been online. Learning has been really, really difficult for them. So on the other hand, a lot of parents that I work with on a positive note have really gotten to know their kids and really know where their difficulties are and what they have trouble with. And I feel like there's a better understanding of what my role is in the school systems, because a lot of people, you're a physical therapist in a school system. What does that mean? If someone hurts their knee, what? No. So, they know the importance now of why you need to cross midline. Why is that so important? Why is your core strength and your core stability? Why is that so important? When you're going up and down stairs, how they need to alternate their feet going up and down.
So Caroline, during this time with COVID and being online, how have you had to adjust your sessions? And I'm imagining even the empowerment that's happening for parents to be really involved in the sessions, to learn about like what their individual child needs, things that they might not have seen when they're in school.
Right.
What's your experience then?
Yes. That part has been really positive, because a lot of the families that I work with, they didn't understand, the importance of your core strength, your stability, sitting up straight. Why I did these, silly exercises to them where you're crossing midline, or why is that so important? So really just being able to, have the opportunity to explain to them, why I do that. And also real time, if they are seeing that why, that their child is having trouble doing a certain activity, and how is that related to reading or to writing. And so that has been really, really good.
Have an example of your why, like why a child needs to sit up straight. Not,
yes.
Yep. I imagine it's more than just being proper, right? We actually know that this impacts the brain and learning and
yes. Yeah.
So I would love to share that.
Okay, so one of the things, whenever I have a new student or someone that's coming to me for the first time, I'll always ask about their developmental milestones. Okay, and so whether they reach their milestones on time, and more often than not, they'll tell me that they were late walkers. Some of the kids, they never crawled. They completely skipped crawling. And okay, great. So in the back of my mind, I will already know that they will probably have trouble crossing midline. That is just a really, using your flexors and extensors and going through those motions. There's a reason why they're called, developmental milestones. So, it just teaching your body and your brain how to go left to right and using both sides of your body. And so that is, it's really important. So some of them, if they do have trouble, we'll go back to even just crawling again, learning that motion. And parents are shocked, and really how that will help with the reading and the writing, looking from your left to right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes I work with children who are, let's say, 7 and older, and yet their parent might see them, or even I might see them as like a child who could play basketball or baseball. They might be a sporty child.
Yes.
They might seem like it, but they also might be like quick to kind of react, kind of like that moral reflex, that kind of real like fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And then if I ask them to do a movement like holding their hips up off the ground or curling up into a meatball, like a tight ball, they can't. They have a really hard time holding their core.
Yes.
And in class, they don't sit up. So I don't know if you can speak to that of like, how can they, parents would be like, but they're fine. They're so physical, but yet that core stability isn't there. They're using maybe other muscles. Is that
Yep. It's like an imbalance between your flexors and extensors. So like you use basketball, for example, you can do a lot of times when they're doing that, they're not really thinking about what they're doing, or it's using a different part of your brain also. Like if you're sitting in class and you're working, there's so much that goes into like your sensory system when you're in class. And if reading or writing is really difficult for you to begin with, and you're focusing so much on what, all that information, auditorially that's coming in, visually that's coming in, they will sit and they'll be like this, moving their bodies all around. And really what it is that, if they were late crawlers, or there could just be an imbalance somewhere between their flexors and extensors, or they could just have a core weak. A lot of kids now, like my kids have that rounded posture now. They're on their phones all the time. Even now with technology too, and even the distance learning, the kids are, looking at the computer like this. They're not having to have that good posture. Someone's really good at basketball. They're just focusing really just kind of on basketball. There's a lot that goes into it, dribbling, your eye-hand coordination, which is great. But when you have to slow down, really take something like step by step versus like in a classroom where it could be hard for a lot of children have a lot of,
And it's true, because you might see if you slow even the basketball down, the child might not be able to do like a layup per se, or even like a jumping jack.
If I was going to use jumping jacks, for example.
You throw them a ball and they seem so sporty, but then you're like, hey, can you do this syncopated, separate body half kind of movement, and all of a sudden, and then can you keep it on a rhythm? Can you keep it going more than 2, more than 3, or does it start to change? And you'll see the child's movement starts to change. So
or a lot of times I'll take out one of their sensory systems like vision, close your eyes, and you see a whole different ball game, which is like, they're all, and kind of, basketball, you're all over you're moving a lot around. A lot of kids that I see, they like their proprioception, where their body is in space, they have a really hard time with that. I know we work a ton on that kind of, whether it's, like joint compressions, waking up your body somehow, doing yoga, deep breathing, different senses, listening to different sounds, smelling different scents, blowing in, but also blowing out, how difficult, a lot of kids that are, it's just all related that they're such picky eaters. And part of it might come back to they may not really have a sense of different smells. That may not be registering. So again, just, I have diffusers going in my room, and I always, I have all different scents and stuff in my room. So a lot of times I'll work with, stuff like that. And again, especially like with cold season and flu season, and, we work on learning how to blow your nose on, that's a motor skill, that's really, really difficult for a lot of kids to do.
I think it's so interesting. This morning, I'm on a different time zone, but this morning I am homeschooling 5 kids, and one of the topics was awareness and mindfulness, and from the school. Just the awareness of like, I put on a diffuser, essential oil, to have like a peppermint smell, because there was a lot of like rubbing noses and sniffing and touching things and hands and fingers and mouths and just like constant movement. And immediately as I changed the smell, you could see in their bodies that there was kind of this opening, and I have to say their hands did come away from their faces. So just even introducing those things it's something that's so tangible. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money.
Nope.
So that's so great. I'm also so aware, so often hear this, and I even see it in the kids that I'm around, the proprioception of like waking up from this reactivity, like kind of this sleep state, to like starting their day. And there you get these like issues, like from a psychological or emotional place of like, oh, they're non-compliant, they're being difficult, they won't transition. And there's so much that I imagine you could share with us about like that proprioception of like getting the body aroused and ready in that just right focus to go in the day. And it seems to me like it's not personal at all. It's their body needing some support.
Right. Yep. And so, interesting enough is, I'm in so many meetings, as you can imagine, because we are reopening our school, so into a hybrid model. So there's a lot of meetings and a lot of discussion about this. And ask these kids to come to school and to stay in one classroom now for a long period of time without their movement breaks and without going into PE class or without going into recess, or, and they have to wear a mask now. Like, so, I've said, usually until, if we're lucky to like mid-November, our weather is usually pretty nice here. And I'm like, whoever I have, I am bringing them outside and I am moving their bodies, because especially the beginning of the day, like, we talked about this a little bit the other day, this whole, anxiety piece. A lot of these kids are really, really anxious. And some of them, a lot of the kids that I work with, they don't understand why we haven't been in school, and they don't understand the routine, and they don't understand that we're in a pandemic, and they just know that they haven't been in their routines. So whether it's, jumping on a trampoline or just doing some yoga poses to start your day, the school that I work, we're really good about doing those in the beginning, whether it's like a Go Noodle movement break or a Just Dance, and just like even just a dance party, just put some music on and kids just move their bodies. I mean, I know for myself, even, how much better you feel after you work out. And you get, yeah. Absolutely. So
well, I think children are so brilliant all the time. But you and I were talking about how like, you can't even like make this stuff up. They just kind of like, they show you what they need over and over again. And so it's so fascinating to me if we take the concept of non-compliance, of kind of like the push and pull of that morning wake up, or transitioning to school, getting online, transitioning off and getting back on. Any of those moments that feel like that, this is the motion I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's actually the motion that they're potentially needing in their bodies.
Yes.
And so they will show you it verbally, making sounds, grunts, facial expressions. They might push against us emotionally. And yet, if we could take that and then say, let me take a beat and do that on your body. Let me give you those squeezes and those, joint compressions, or let me shake your arms, or let's get that pillow out and really like push and pull against each other. That might be all they need, and then they're ready to go. And
right. Or even, or doing their, or even doing your session, like whatever you're in class, like in a different position, whether you're laying on your belly.
Lay on the belly, yes.
Laying on, you're getting input into your arms, and, and your head needs to be up. You can't be looking down all the time, and you're getting input into your back muscles. So, like just working in different positions too, is, sitting on a ball, or, or whatever.
That's so key too, because so many people don't have access to different spaces, and they might feel like, well, I don't have that opportunity, right? And so it's incredible what we can do with just body posture. All of a sudden you're in a new space. I can say, like, instead of talking about clients, like my own child during a break, wanted to stay and draw instead of going outside, even if it was only for like 15 minutes. And I said, well, then if you're going to draw, you must be on your belly. And he's just like, I want to sit at the table. I'm like, you've been at the table for, 20 minutes or whatever the class was. I said, now it's belly time or you can go outside. So like kind of giving those choices of like, something has to happen in your body to shift.
Right. And I think like what you just said is so key too, is because they feel like so many things are out of their control. So if you give them the options, then they feel like they're in control because they're making the decision. So and you usually have less resistance, because that's their idea, their choice, their choice they're making.
Yeah. What else I know a big conversation is about handwriting and penmanship and grip and that goes into posture. Any information for parents to know about in terms of hand posturing on using grips? And
just so fine motor skills, they're so important. Usually if you don't have a strong foundation, so you're going to see issues with your fine motor skills. So if your gross motor skills, if like your core and your back muscles and your leg muscles, if they're weak, that's going to usually transfer over and you're going to have weaker fine motor skills. So even like you're saying, even if they're at a desk, even having some putty or some fidgets and something where your hands are always moving. Thinking of different games like math games, and you could use chopsticks with pom-poms and but making it fun, like using math, slime, and anything where you're playing the piano, isolating your fingers. We play this, I play this little game with kids all the time, like imitate me and 2 thumbs up or like this and this. And you would not, it's a lot of these things are really, really difficult for kids. But, and just, doing picking up your hands and exercises like that. And then it just kind of versus because if they know that writing's hard for them. So if you give them a pen or a pencil, they may be they don't want to write anymore, but it's more fun to, use Play-Doh or slime or, make some slime and whatever color or glitter you want to add to it. Even here the other day, I've been doing these little groups outside for people that just need a little bit extra support. It was really hot. So we just got one of those little pools that you have in the backyard. Well, to fill it up, we got the hose and squeezing the hose just to even fill it. Yes. So working on those skills, but they don't realize that they're working on.
Yeah. I could imagine a whole routine, like even when teachers are talking to kids and they're saying as you wait to be called on, there's just ways to make it where they don't have to feel like work and it's just part of it, or making up funny ways to say hello to their friends. You and I truly have this passion for understanding children through the body and how meaningful the body is in communication and helping parents understand what our children are communicating to us. How do you support, or what can we tell viewers about understanding children's nonverbal communication, and or even if they're verbal, if they have unique nuances about their movements or how they display their learning, what should children be aware of or be thinking about when they're in a class with other students?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, and something that I'm really passionate about. For instance, there was this little girl that I work with who is in a wheelchair and she's cortically blind and she's nonverbal. It's really hard to gauge what her, if she's understanding what you're talking about, or also to communicate with her. A few years ago, she had this amazing class, and what they really wanted was during morning meeting, they all sit on the floor and they really wanted her to be a part of the group. But because she was in her wheelchair, she was, so much higher than her. So I did, they were really asking the classroom teacher. And so she had come to me and said, is there anything that we could do that she could be a part of the group? So I did a little bit of research. And we found there is this, it's called a tomato chair. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the tomato chair. Okay. So basically it's a chair that sits, low to the ground, but it's completely supported. We found it. And what we did is we went into the classroom. We also, read a story and we talked about her and, really explained to the students, what her diagnosis is and why she has trouble. She's not able to verbally communicate to you. We looked into the price of the tomato chair and it was very expensive. And so the kids, this class took it upon themselves. They wrote a letter to the principal and the superintendent of our district that they wanted to do a fundraiser to raise money. So for 1 week, they played all the, they got to dress up a certain day. And if you wanted to dress up, you had to bring $1 to school. Ended up being like a school-wide thing. It was amazing. They made posters all over the school. Long story short, they made enough money to buy like a few of these chairs and stuff like that. But the biggest question that everyone always was asking is like, why is it called a tomato chair? And because that just doesn't make, it's just a funny name for a chair. So so I was doing a little bit of research on this, and I just think that this is just a really nice story, is that there was a dad who was into making adaptive equipment. That was just his job. He ended up having a daughter that had Down syndrome. And so he was going through the steps and stuff like that. She started going to school. She needed something similar to what it was. And he was a big gardener. And he's in his garden one day. I guess he had some beefsteak tomatoes, and he picked them, and they were serving them, at dinner that night. And then I guess it just came to him because, beefsteaks, they could have bumps here and there, and they might not look like a regular tomato, but when you cut it open and eat it, it's like just as delicious or even more delicious as a regular tomato. So he made that analogy, and that's why he developed the tomato chair, and really just wanted, that someone may look different or act different or communicate a little bit different than you or I, but it doesn't mean that like they're just not still an amazing person on the inside. That was like the biggest takeaway of that whole thing, which I thought was so nice. They did a really nice job with it. The other thing that I just wanted to say is, through this distance learning and all these challenges too, is that, I found a book, and it was on Audible, and it was called C is for Cerebral Palsy. And it was an Audible book, and it was written and narrated by a child that has cerebral palsy. And it goes through the alphabet. A is, in it, and it goes through. So this little girl, she can't really even hold her head up. She's nonverbal. She does have 2 little switches that are like a yes and no when she's, against gravity. So we, throughout the years, we've been trying to assess her knowledge, and it's been really, really difficult. But when we read that story to her, and it's amazing because I have it on video, and her mom was in the session and also her para, and we asked her, like, we would just keep pausing it and say, Emily, like, when we got to S, the little girl talked about seizures, and what they feel like. And we would say, do you have seizures? And in every single question that we asked her, she responded. She knew. And it was a light bulb for everybody that, like, she's understanding everything that is going on around her world.
Yeah.
Like the moments like that, oh my God. And then the biggest thing is, they talk about that they don't want to be talked about when they're right there. Talk to me.
Right.
Yeah, everybody. And even, children with autism, and, whether there's a noise in the environment that we may not be picking up on, but for whatever it's driving them insane and they can't get past it, just really just trying to raise awareness that it's okay, and that, there's something internally going on that they're trying to work through.
It's so important. I so many stories that I've seen over the years of children being in class, nonverbal, and then finally getting that assistive technology and running around. And for years, everyone's been talking about them and thinking they didn't understood. And then the child writes, like, one of my first kiddos I ever worked with, right out of my master's, he just on his own wrote, "I'm testing you all." He'd been listening all this time, and just have that opportunity to be able to say that, right? But I know even just with this technology, just to add to that, a couple of things I was thinking about as you're saying that is, one is just helping children. I think adults take away the judgment of the children as they maybe laughing when they see something or curious about something or asking questions. And I love how you're saying, like, you brought the information to the students and let them learn about this individual so that they can be more connected and more curious and learn and not be fearful or not be kind of tentative of, like, what can I say? What can I not say? Because we talk about it. And then also just like with the technology sessions where all of a sudden the child will be typing something and or moving, and the parent will say things like, oh, they're not focusing or they're distracted. But lo and behold, what they're communicating by touching the keys or by writing something actually reflected what they were feeling or what they needed. Yeah. A session where they're saying, my child doesn't communicate their feelings, or not like telling me with words, but the child's sitting there and like really pulling or pushing or slithering under the table, or like sitting and moving like this the whole time, and really, or rocking a lot, or rocking more quickly, and just bringing that awareness to the body and saying that that is communication.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And
So,
that, so many of them, right, they communicate through their eyes,
mm-hmm.
Their facial expressions.
Yeah, that tongue of them. The
Mm,
tongue.
yep, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And so another part that's been really nice even too is like even doing some of these like small groups at home, is that even, my own children being here and being able to be, seeing that and like help, being helpers, and just been a really good learning experience, I think, for everybody. Yeah. A lot of the parents, through this whole COVID thing, they just feel so alone, where they've had so much support, and just, it's hard. It's hard for them. It's hard for everybody. So I think just trying to think that anybody could do to just accept them a little bit.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Accept them.
And thank you so much for bringing that up and sharing this with our viewers, because we do obviously, in the best intentions, need to focus on our own children, and we're trying to make the best world for them. And then also just to bring the best world is that when we learn about these individuals, all children, the whole child, and just kind of being reflective about what it's like in someone else's home at this time.
Right.
Yeah. So Caroline, where can parents, educators learn more about your work?
I have an Instagram page where I have a bunch of activities posted. SMT treatment is on the Instagram page. Children's name are Sophie, Matthew, and Thomas. So Sophie, so that's the SMT, but it's also sensory motor technique. On that page is like my phone number and my email address.
So important to just keep having our children understand about their bodies, and for us as the educators now to learn how we can make these adaptive and useful accommodations for our children during this time, so that they can feel really, their best selves for learning.
Right. And I think, the biggest takeaway too is that, for parents, is that some days may go great and some days may not. And that's okay. It's just like us,